the wicked farmer of Okpono. They found the scarecrow standing over the fields even after his body was buried. Nobody put it there. Nobody dared touch it. I grew up in Okpono, a small village in Nigeria, where the land was everything. Our lives revolved around planting, harvesting, and praying for rain. Most people were kind, but not Udoka. Udoka was a farmer who owned more land than anyone else in the village. They called him the wicked farmer because he was cruel, greedy, and had no heart for anyone but himself. Udoka had a way of making people fear him. He charged his tenants outrageous rents, and if they couldn't pay, he'd kick them off his land, sometimes burning their homes to prove a point. He beat his workers if they dared rest under the sun, and his whip, thick and cracked, left scars like snakes on their backs. But what made Udoka truly feared was his obsession with power. My uncle Chibuzo worked for Udoka. He hated it, but he had no choice. He had a family to feed. One day, Chibuzo came home looking pale, his hands trembling as if he'd seen a ghost. I remember sitting by the fire that night, staring at him as he whispered to my mother. He buried something in the field, Chibuzo said. It wasn't seeds, it wasn't fertilizer. It was alive. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I leaned closer, my heart thudding in my chest. Chibuzo wouldn't say more. He just shook his head and stared into the flames like he was trying to forget what he saw. A week later, the rumors started. Workers said they heard wailing coming from Udoka's fields at night. Not the kind of wailing you'd hear from animals or the wind. This was human. People stopped going near his farm after sunset, but Udoka didn't care. He kept growing richer, his crops always flourishing, while others struggled. One night, curiosity got the best of me. I was just a boy, maybe 12 or 13. My friends dared me to go near Udoka's farm after dark. They said if I could grab a handful of his soil and bring it back, they'd call me brave for life. I waited until the moon was high and slipped out of my hut. The village was quiet, the air heavy. My legs felt weak as I approached the edge of Udoka's fields. It was darker there, like the shadows were thicker somehow. That's when I heard it, the crying. Low, broken sobs like someone in deep pain. My body froze. The sound wasn't far off, maybe 20 steps into the field. I wanted to run, but my pride wouldn't let me. I stepped into the rows of maize, the stalks towering over me, whispering as the wind brushed against them. The crying grew louder. Then I saw it, the scarecrow. He stood in the middle of the field, his head tilted as though it was watching me. But this wasn't like any scarecrow I'd seen before. His clothes were torn and filthy, but the fabric clung to it in a way that looked wrong, like the scarecrow had bones underneath. His head was a sack, but something heavy weighed it down. The crying was coming from the scarecrow. My breath caught. I wanted to run, but my legs were rooted to the ground. Suddenly, the crying stopped. The silence was worse. The scarecrow's head twitched, and I swear it looked straight at me. I dropped the small pouch of soil I'd scooped and bolted. The rows of maize clawed at my arms as I ran, and the sound of rustling followed me, like something or someone was chasing me. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the village. My chest burned, and my legs wobbled as I collapsed near the well. My friends found me there, shaking and barely able to speak. I told them what I saw, but they laughed it off, saying I was just scared of the dark. The next morning, news spread that Udoka was dead. His body was found in his farmhouse, sitting upright in his chair, his mouth open as though he'd been screaming. The village elders said he must have been cursed for his wickedness. But here's the thing, the scarecrow was still standing in the middle of his fields. None of the workers admitted putting it there, and no one dared take it down. They said if you passed by Udoka's land at night, you could still hear the crying. I left Okpono years ago, but I can't forget that night. Sometimes I still hear the wailing in my dreams. And when I wake up, I wonder, what did Udoka bury in his fields that night? And why does he still cry?